Hello guys, today we're going to be talking about the CMMT series controllers from Festo, and they have a stepper, which is this little smaller one over here, and then they've got a servo. And we're going to be connecting this EthIP to a Allen Bradley PLC. The Allen Bradley PLC has Rockwell software in it, and the specific thing we're going to be talking about today is change my diagram here. So Festo has created an add-on instruction that's used in the Rockwell software, and that instruction is to control Telegram 102, which is a PROFIdrive telegram, and basically the EthIP here is a transport device for PROFIdrive. These controllers have PROFIdrive in them, so it's basically we're going to be talking PROFIdrive over EthIP to control the CMMT-AS in a velocity mode, advanced velocity mode, and let's talk about a little bit of detail on what that means. I've downloaded a manual from the website here, and I can show you where I got that website. Here, 1 second here. Okay, so open up your browser. We want to go to www.festo.com, and then you get to your country. I've selected United Kingdom or Great Britain, so if you click on this, you can go into this here and you pick country of choice. So I've got United Kingdom, and we want to go to support downloads for this entire video. This is the only place I download stuff, is the support download area. And in this case, we're going to type in CMMT-AS, and we're going to pick, see how it's EC, that's EtherCAT, EP is EthIP, PN is Profinet. So we're going to pick the EthIP controller. And once we've done that, then all the tabs down here will reflect the documentation, the expert guides, the software that's all to do with that particular controller, okay? So in this case here, this first top manual here, I've downloaded that, and that's the manual I have open right now for discussion. And it's an easy reading. It's only 1,090 pages. That's because it discusses all the field buses. And at page 1032 in this 2019-08 manual here, we've got the discussion on telegrams, or just an overview here. And Telegram 1 is what I call basic velocity, or what Festo calls basic velocity. The Telegram 102 is advanced velocity, and that's what block that we're using today. The main difference is that the basic velocity has got 16-bit, and it's lower resolution, and the advanced velocity is 32-bit resolution, as well as being able to control the torque, or has a torque reduction in it. Okay. If you break down the bits and bytes of this, it's also on the next page here. So Telegram 1 has got in and output. It's got 2 words of data, and then the 102 that we're discussing today has got a few extra, obviously because it needs to control a few extra things like torque and whatnot. If you break that down even further, I've got a document here. Hopefully you can read this. Basically, I've got my 10 words of information going out and coming back. Okay, this is my outputs here, and this is my stats coming back. And these are the bits and bytes, what they actually mean. And if you get in the user manual, it'll break it down even further so you can figure out what's going on. So the Telegram 101, Telegram 1, which is the basic, only has a few, it's only got 2 words, in and out. So it's a lot less data going back and forth. What's next here? Okay, let's go back to the website. So in order to commission the drive, Festo has a piece of software called Festo Automation Suite. So let's talk about that for a second here. If you go to the Festo website where we were before, and you go to the software tab, click on the software tab, And you'll see here that there's quite a few mentions of the Festo Automation Suite, and there are some called plugins. And if you scroll further, then there's one just called Festo Automation Suite. So think of Festo Automation Suite as a container. So Festo Automation Suite is the base for all plugins. So you have to, as a minimum, install Festo Automation Suite on your computer. And once you've done that, depending on the hardware you have, could be a PLC, could be a servo controller, could be a stepper controller. Those all require plugins. So you would download this, and then you would install plugins based upon what you want to use in the software. Okay, so you click on commissioning, you get the download here, you get an exe file. I'm going to download this one, and then at this time I'm going to be doing a CMMT-AS, so I am going to download this particular version only because this one just came out and I don't want to reflect something new in this training for everyone here. So I'm going to download this. You would click on this again, and it's a FSI. So it's a, as you see here, it's a Festo Automation Suite plugin file, and then you would save that. Okay. The next step is to install it. So if I open up where I have personally put my files, and I go to the directory here, I've downloaded the Festo Automation Suite right here, and I would simply double click or right click and say run as an administrator. That's the more preferred method, just to running as administrator, because you need to be an administrator when you install the software. At that point, you simply follow the directions, default, and so on and so forth. When you're finished doing that, then you start the software up. So if I have downloaded this plugin right here, this is offline, and I'll show you what to do with that right now. So when you first start up the Festo Automation Suite, you've got this little layout right here. I've been using it for a while, so I've got a couple of projects, and I could say new project, but we're still installing right now, so we're going to install device plugins. So you've got a couple options here. We've downloaded that plugin from the website, and at that point you come in here and you install offline file. I'm just going to grab the path here, close that, put the path in here. So I've gone back to that same directory, and I would click on this and I would say open, and it will install the file, and you follow the directions on that. The alternative way, which as you can see here, I can just say update the plugin, and it will go to the internet and install the up-to-date thing. Again, I'm using 1319, so you may have to do this manually. You'll see here that once you've got everything installed, that it's continuously going out and checking for updates. I'm not the kind of person that updates really quick on everything, because you like to keep everything at the same rev. So I've installed the CMMT plugin, I've installed the main system. I've also installed additional plugins like the CMMT, the CPX. There's extensions that go along with it for code assist, so on and so forth. But in your case and in this case, we're only requiring the CMMT-AS or the CMMT-ST, depending on what you're doing. Could be the stepper or the servo, and then the main one. Okay, so we've installed the software, and we're ready for our next step, which is to create a new project. So new project, you would click on new project, and you get a blank screen, and you're thinking, okay, what are all these squares? So there's a couple things you can do here. You can go up to this thing over here, which as you can see it says device scan, and you can come into here, and if you've got anything powered up and you've got something that's directly connected to the network that you can see. Let me just power up one so I can show you here. So This comes in, does the scan immediately, but if you want to do another scan, you come over here, refresh. So I've got a couple of controllers connected here. At this point, I could come into here and just say add to project, okay? So if I click on add to project, it'll add it to the home page over here, which I'll just let it do and you can see what it's doing. That's the lazy man's way. Lazy man's way can sometimes get you in trouble, so you might have somebody's corrupt code or somebody else's project in there that you don't want, and now you're opening up and bringing that in. Could be a bad rev, could be a bad anything. So it depends on how trusting you are with what's in the controller. Let's finish here. Device imported. So now if you go back to the home screen, you'll see here that it added this offline or the online project. So it sucked up the information from and put it here. So if I was to double click on this, we can now go into that and it'll open up the configuration for that. Okay, I'm going to close that and I'm going to delete, right click, delete. Okay. And you could do the same thing on the right hand side of the screen. So we've got this area right here. We can click on this over here for scan. Same kind of thing. And then I can drag this or I can click on add. It's the same concept. Okay. Going back to the screens here, when you click on a device, you'll probably have an out of the box manufacturing, which has got no IP address. I forget what I've done in the past, but basically you click on this, you can come down to network settings and modify your settings here and then say activate new. The important thing right here is that when you look at this particular controller, the CMMT-AS, there's some Ethernet ports on the top of the unit and there's one on the front. So the X18 port on the front, that's for programming interface. The ones on the top are for the EthIP, okay? So I've labeled them for my own purposes and I've got an IP address assigned to both ports. You know, the port up here is both the physical ports and then the one on the front here is another one, okay? So going back out of the actions here, I want to show you that there's a couple other things here. There's a support and there's a manuals. So if you haven't downloaded other manuals and you want to download the certain documents offered there, you can simply download them from the cloud. There's application notes. There's no device description files yet. I guess they're still updating that. And you can change the device name. There's a whole bunch of nice little features over here. And then the device details are right there. Okay, so we're going to start with a fresh project, which means blank slate, default everything from a software point of view. And we're going to click on the plus sign. I'm going to add an Ethernet IP device because you do have other, like we've got PLCs that we can choose from. We've got EtherCAT if we're doing EtherCAT. EthIP is what we're doing today, an EthIP drive, and we're going to pick a, I think that's the right one. Okay, so I just read the side of the label, and on the label, we've got it's a CMMT-AS C23A, and you can either type that in there, or you can type in the product code. You can do one or the other. You can start just typing CMMT, and it'll filter. But basically, for the sake of getting it bang on, I'm just going to click that one and say Add Device. At that point, you can now rename the device because typically you're going to have a lot of these drives in one project. So you can click that, rename it, and you're good to go. So now when you double click on this, you're going to go into that to start to configuring it. And you can just simply start adding other drives over here on the right. And let's click on this and get into it. Okay, so we're presented with defaults, and the reason that we've got all these little warnings here, that's what the orange represents as a warning. Warnings count. We have 42 warnings. Well, that's because we haven't set up any hardware yet. So it's got a blank project, it's only got a controller, there's all kinds of little warnings, okay? So we're going to use the wizard. We can either click over here, or you can click on manual. In this case, I always like to use the wizard. It's a very common thing to do here. And as you see here, it's presenting you with some options. And top to bottom, left to right, that's the normal way of dealing with this software. Click on the plus sign. Again, you would read the label on the side of your controller motor. This is my motor right here. So I'm clicking on that. You see that, and I can just click on add or apply, and it's now adding that motor to the project. The next thing is to configure the axis. In my case, I've got a user-defined rotary, so I'm just going to do rotary here, and I'm going to click on unlimited axis. I can click this property here, and we're going with revs, RPMs, the default here. So I'm going to click on apply. And then I'm going to click on it. You always need a mounting kit even when it doesn't exist. You click on that, you click apply, and you're done as far as the hardware goes. So at the next point, you can click on the tab up top here, or you can click on the next button. So next goes to here. And in this case here, you need some sort of a load. I'm just going to lie and tell it it's 0.1, and we have 120 hooked up to the top of the drive. Don't forget there's a scroll bar over here. There are other things that you have to consider. Again, I'll hit the next switch. In my case, I've got a normally closed contact on a reference switch, and I have normally closed on limit switches. And I'll hit the next button, and then the homing method I'm going to have is going to be a negative reference switch with 0 pulse, so I'm going to drop that down. Go find that. Here it is here. The negative reference switch with 0 pulse, so I'm going to home to the reference switch, and then once I find the reference switch, I'll come off that. Look for the 1 index pulse on the encoder. Hit the next button. The move to axis 0 point afterwards, that just means that once you found it, then it's going to move by this offset and then stop, and then call that 0. The next button here, and I'm going to leave the default here. That's the simplest way. And then it's going to do some calculations. We'll see here that the warnings have been reduced. Okay, so I want to get to a point where I have an error-free or warning-free project, so I'm going to go up to here where it says Correct Parameters. And that's what I suggest most people do. Now, what it's doing here is it's got some actual values that are in the project, and then based upon the motor, the axis, and a couple other things, it's offering suggestions for the max values or the min values, okay? And you have to have all these checkboxes over here selected in order for them to be applied. I'm just going to click on apply, and it should take care of all of them. And now I can hit the save button, because the save button means that we are normally I would save. I'm not going to save right now, okay? Actually, yeah. So I'll save after. So I have a warning-free project, and I'm ready to go for the next step, which is, as I said, I always work top to bottom and so is the software. So I'm just going to check the device settings here. This all looks correct. And we enable the servo. That's the default I/O field bus. That's important to understand. The field bus meaning that there's going to be a software enable, and then there'll be a control enable, which is via digital input. The next step here is to go to the field bus tab. Okay, so again, remember that there are scroll bars here, because the very first thing we need to do is to select the telegram. Okay, telegram 1 is the default. That's for basic velocity. 102 is the advanced velocity, and 111 is for positioning. So I'm going to select 102 and then move on here. Also, something worthwhile to note is that these little, I think they're called adorners here, these little dots, they all offer help. So you can come down here, and if you click into here, so let's just change this real quick. So if I come into here and I don't like that, I can click on this and it changes it to the default, okay? In my project, I know that, well, let's go take a peek here. Let's make some common sense of it. So if I look at the motor itself, we see here that the maximum rotation velocity is 10,000 RPM. So I want the max rotation to be 10,000 RPM. Hit the enter button. It updates the other things that are related. The next thing I want to modify is the acceleration, so that if I tell it to go from 0 to 10,000, I'm not going to accelerate too harsh. So I'm just going to modify these values for accel and decel. I'll leave the jerk the way it is here. The last thing to set up on this page is the EthIP configuration, and as I said before, the EthIP is this one right here. So I've already set the IP address as 1.185, so you have to do that in your project, okay? So you have to come in here and do the exact same setting you have already previously set through the software. Otherwise, when you download it and then you do a reboot, it'll come back with whatever this IP address is here, which is 01 default, and that's the same default as the programming port up top here, and then you'll have a conflict and you'll be pulling your hair out, okay? And then, seeing as how we're doing IP addresses, let's go and we can pick for the project here. If you click on this right here, then the software will scan and find the port, okay? And at that point, you say use this for device communication, and now it's updated that. So the programming port is going to be 1.184, the EthIP port is going to be 1.185, and we'll keep moving on here. So digital I/O, not much to set up here. I'm just going with the basic project here. All right, and there's not a whole lot else for me to do here. I don't have anything special in my project here. I'm not doing master slave. I'm just doing something very simple. So you can keep going through all these individual screens here and make sure that all these settings are a match for your application. You'll see that some of the things that we've already done the setup are reflected into the normal pages. Another extremely important thing is to understand that you have a graphical interface, and then if you click on this right here, you have a text-based interface. The text-based, you get more options. So from a graphic standpoint, they only show you a couple things on the screen here that you can scroll up and down with, and there are many, many other ones behind the graphics, okay? So if you want to search for something, you can just put it in the filter here. If you want to modify what you're looking at, you can put it in the filter here. There's a lot of nice little features in the Festo Automation Suite software. Go back to graphic mode here. And then down here at the very bottom left, we have the parameter list, which is all the parameters, okay? So the only drawback to this page right here is that the update rate when you're online is not very fast. Whereas these other pages get updated a little faster. Okay. So we're ready to download. Before you download, I typically want to do an update and save. Okay, so what I've done, I'll just modify this right here, is that I came in to here before saving, and I did this edit description here. So if you edit this, you can come in and modify this. So for my own sake, I've said that the Festo Automation Suite software I'm using is that version, the plugin I'm using is that one, and then the firmware is that one. That way I know offline when I'm looking at the project, I've got that. You can add a custom image here if you want, and then you would hit Save button. I've saved this as a name that I felt comfortable with. You guys can do the same. Keep in mind that, well, I'll show you. So when you do a save, I'm going to hit a save button here. and let's go look at the directory you created. Okay, so I saved to this very long directory here. So work file, quite a bit of length, and we all know that there's a limitation in Windows with I think it's 255 characters, including directory names and file names. So you'll notice here that the project I called was CMMT-AS EP. I put it in this FAS directory here, and it created a whole bunch of directories and a file name and so on and so forth. And each directory has additional files, additional subdirectories. So keep in mind that when you're doing things that you want to keep them to sort of a minimum, so that you don't exceed the limitations of Windows. I mean, just keep that in the back of your mind, please. So we've hit the save button and we're ready to rock and roll and download. All right, so we go back to the project here, and I'm going to connect. And what should happen is either you have a default project and it'll say, hey, there's nothing in here, do you want to download? Or like my project here, I have been doing a couple of things here, and I'll have a discrepancy between what's in the controller and what's offline. So I'm going to do a write to device. And what we've just done was put the project from our computer into the controller, into the volatile area. And if you want it to be there when you cycle power to the controller, the next thing is to store it. So at the top here, if you were to follow this, it says parameters have been changed. It tells you that they'll be lost in case of restart. As well, in the controller here, you'll see here that there's these little things here. If you change this, it'll require this. So there's little hints all over the code here. So I'm going to do a store. And I always do a restart of the controller whenever I do anything to do with a brand new project, because typically when you change communication parameters and whatnot, if you don't restart, then you'll be pulling your hair out and some strange anomaly will be happening. Okay, so I'm going to hit the restart button. And when it's finished, it'll be back online and you'll be ready to go. So say, waiting for it to respond. If you heard a little bit in the background, it's cycling power right now. Okay, so we're online, almost. Come on, give me the green. Good. And we're ready to start commissioning with a base project. So I'm just going to do a recap here. So if you go up to the menus, there's that little hamburger up top here. You go down to the repositories. Actually, let's go to the about. So I have this version of Festo Automation Suite installed. I go to the repositories. I have this 1319 that I'm using. And now if I go to the scan tool, which you don't have to be online for, you'll see on the right hand side here that I have firmware 18.0562 installed. And you can come down through here and install firmware this way. You'll see here that my firmware is newer than what is offered in here. Well, that's because I was special treatment from tech support and they provided a release software that's not available yet. Okay, it's really simple to install the firmware. You click on this, you would say download the firmware from the cloud, and then you can install it. Alternatively, if you go back to the website, you can scroll up to, you're on the software tab, look for a piece of software called Festo Field Device Tool. It's probably at the very bottom. Yeah, right here. This Festo Field Device Tool. This is another tool that is being used to download firmware and do diagnostics for the Festo software, and it covers many hardware. Okay, look at that. So a lot of little options here, and let's move into commissioning now. Okay, so we're online, and we have 3 tabs up top here. Okay, the parameterization is where we've done everything offline and we can modify parameters. There is a control area and a diagnostics area. So typically, the first place you're going to go is diagnostics because you do not have a green LED, which I'm surprised I have. And you can come through here. You can either do an acknowledge all. So sometimes when you download new information to the controller, it's a little leftover confused, and you do an acknowledge all. It gets rid of anything it can. The I/O state is controlled here, so you can look at your STO for your safe break off and your safe torque off. You can look at your control enable, which is this device here. You can look at your limit switches down here, your reference switches. So this is where your I/O status can be understood and verified. There's an error log. This is an extremely useful area. Classification, you can modify and configure many different parts of this. I'm not going to get into that detail. And then you can set up traces, which I've done a couple things here. And then auto tuning, which I'm not going to do. In the control area over here, this is where we start to do some movement with the controller. So let's start to do that. First thing we need to do is to take the control sovereignty. If there is a PLC hooked up to this, we want to make sure that this plugin or this software has control. And that's what we do is we use this little option button here. So it's now got the control sovereignty, and the next thing we're going to do is enable the power stage. So click on that, and everything should be good. If I go back to the diagnostics page and go to the device state, I just want to let you see here what's going on and off here. So if I turn this power stage off, this over here will go off. This over here will go off. So stop ramp, driver's not referenced. You have standstill reached. So the drive not referenced means you can't really do anything until you home the drive or reference it. Homing is often referred to as referencing. Actually, vice versa. Referencing is the true correct way of saying something, I guess. And then that establishes the absolute 0 position. So as I said before, I have the homing set up as, as a negative reference switch with 0 pulse. So when I'm over here and I hit start homing, the drive is going to move. Actually, let's do this homing, and then I'll show you what's actually happening. So I hit the start homing, and it's gonna. So over here, you can see that the drive's turning here a little bit. There's a reference switch over here. So if I switch back to my screen here, now the drive is referenced, and the controller is happy about what we've done. So at this point, we can start moving. Okay, so if I want to jog the axis, you see how we're jogging over here on the right hand side. If you click on that there, you can, you can also add a couple things here. So I'm going to add torque set point because that's part of this. You can add the I/O that is simulated with the Telegram 102. Actual DC bus, those are nice ones. So the DC bus, because we have 120 hooked up, is 168, 169. And if we want to give it a target here, we can execute that. It'll move to 5 rev, and stop. And at this point, we can also execute some records, which I didn't show you. If I go to the parameter page here, I can add records over here. So I've added a few extra ones. So I'm just record number 8, 10, 11, 12. That's just, 100 RPM, 300, 1000, 2000. You can execute it right here by just clicking that. And you'll see here that the RPM is 100. And click there. Now we're going 200 or 300, depends what I've got. As well, on the control page over here, you've got the same concept over here. If I want to configure for 1000 RPM, now we're going 1000 RPM, and hit the stop button. So from this point, we're basically finished commissioning in the software itself. So we'll turn the control sovereignty off and give it back to the PLC, and we're going to move to the next step here. A few other points mentioning here. There are online, or not online, but help that's embedded in to the controller projects here, into the software. And so we can do some light reading in here if you like. Depends on the plugin you have installed. Like I said, Festo sells PLC, so this is installed as well. If you're looking for help on the Festo Automation Suite itself, there's again a help file on that. What else here? I guess the last thing to do is hit the save button. And now we know we have a good project and we're ready to hook up the PLC.